This is the VOA Special English Education Report. More than 100 teenage musicians recently attended a summer camp in Los Angeles to learn about the music business. Some of the advice they received came from the youngest member of the Jonas Brothers, 18-year-old Nick. Nick Jonas appeared in Broadway musicals before he became a pop star with his brothers. He told the students at the Grammy camp that social media was incredibly important at the beginning of the brothers' career and still is today. With Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, there are so many instant ways to connect with your fans. Other music professionals also shared their knowledge at the week-long camp. The annual event is part of Grammy in the Schools, a project from the organizers of the music industry's Grammy Awards. The camp gives students a chance to perform or to learn music production skills. Ben Lopiccolo worked on his skills as a music reporter. He found that he really enjoyed writing and telling people about music to expand their tastes. These teens hope to be part of an industry that is going through big changes. Kristen Madsen at the Grammy Foundation points to the influence of social networking on sites like Facebook and Twitter. There are new ways and new roadmaps for kids to succeed in the music industry, and they have a lot more access to doing it themselves. 13-year-old Grayson Chance is about to release his first album. He told the other young musicians that his career began with a music video on YouTube. Giovanni Quattrocchi hopes for a career as a music producer. "I'm excited to see where music is going to go," he says. For example, he likes the way, especially with hip-hop, there's a lot of sampling of different genres of music. Music is also becoming more international, says Elise Go, who hopes to be a songwriter. She points to American influences in Korean and Chinese pop music. She says, "That's very cool to hear. A pop song you think you'd hear on the radio in America in another language." Brian London plays keyboards for Lady Gaga and other artists. He told the students that succeeding in music is about hard work, not just talent. Being a great player, everybody's a great player, so a lot of artists, management labels, and music directors look at more than just being a great player in order to be hired for a gig. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can watch a video about the Grammy camp at voaspecialenglish.com. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Public universities in Nigeria have reopened after a nearly 6-month-long strike by teachers. Repeated strikes can add months, even years, to the time it takes a student to finish a study program. Students at public universities across Nigeria say they are worried about exams and completing their project work. The Academic Staff Union of Universities, a labor group, suspended the strike in December. Part of the settlement was a government promise to invest billions of dollars during the next 5 years in university buildings and equipment. The government said that soon 25% of the nation's budget will be spent on education. Some teachers say the strike was really about pushing the government to make Nigeria's universities better. Laz Ematike is with Delta State University. He says the strike was not only to improve conditions for university teachers, but was meant to help everyone. He says better science laboratories and other improvements will let Nigeria compete with other parts of the world. Countries throughout Africa, not just Nigeria, are considering how to answer the exploding demand for admission to universities. These countries must also improve academic values and requirements and find ways to pay teachers enough to keep them. Hundreds of thousands of students pass college entrance exams every year, but many cannot attend public universities because there are not enough classrooms or teachers. University lecturers say they will be watching to make sure their schools get and effectively use the money the Nigerian government has promised. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Nigeria has one of the world's highest rates of people who cannot read or write. But a government agency is taking steps to educate more than 400,000 Nigerians in Kano State. The Kano State Agency for Mass Education has set high goals for literacy, the ability to read and write. Minister of State for Education, Nyesom Wike, reported on the situation last September. The minister said the number of illiterate Nigerian adults has increased by 10 million over the past 20 years. The current total is 35 million. To improve that situation, Kano's education agency has joined with Education for All, a project of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Working together, they have launched more than 8,000 adult literacy classes in 44 areas. Their hope is to raise adult literacy levels to 90% in Kano State by 2015. The agency says it now has 16,000 people to teach and train students. Another goal is to create jobs and improve living conditions. The Kano City Women's Center is one of many learning centers for young and adult women. It serves hundreds of students at its school and at a vocational or occupational center. At the center, women learn sewing skills and make products like soaps and air fresheners. 25-year-old Halima Aminu is a mother of 3 children. She started going to the Kano City Women's Center in 2010. Now she is in her final year at the senior secondary level. Halima Aminu hopes to continue her education at the next level and someday become a medical doctor. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. What American students are expected to learn has long been different from state to state. We talked last time about the tradition of local control of schools. To some people, the lack of national academic standards is an important limit on federal powers. But others say all it does is limit American competitiveness in a world that is becoming more educated. Now, state governors and chief school officers are leading a movement toward what are known as the Common Core State Standards. These list content in math and English language arts that students are expected to learn each year from kindergarten to high school. In the past year, most of the 50 states have adopted these standards. That speed is partly explained by President Obama's Race to the Top competition. Accepting the standards helped states that competed last year for federal money for school reform efforts. Patrick Murray has been an elected member of the school governing board in Bradford, Maine for 4 years. The public school system is small, just 1,200 students from 5 towns. In April, Maine became the 42nd state to approve the Common Core standards. Mr. Murray says he does not trust supporters of these standards. They say this is a state-led effort, but he thinks the goal is national control of education. He says many states have adopted the Common Core standards only because they were offered federal money. My opinion is when you have federal mandates and federal money involved, it's no longer state-led. Mr. Murray says national academic standards would violate the United States Constitution. He believes the federal government should have no role in education. None. Patience Blythe disagrees. Ms. Blythe has taught for 5 years. She recently moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Before that, she was a science teacher in Texas, one of the few states not to adopt the Common Core standards. Ms. Blythe says national standards could improve the results of American students on international science tests. She says, not everything has to be a state issue. There could be a benefit from some more federal involvement in our education system, that we could address a lot of the inequalities that we have. She also disagrees with those who say the standards could limit the ability of teachers to be creative. The reality is, the standards give you keys and tools to understand what the objectives are. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. The number of students from China studying at universities across the United States continues to increase. Some estimates say the number of undergraduate students from China in the United States has doubled in the last 2 years. Economists say the trend is largely caused by a growing middle class in China. Los Angeles County has one of the largest Chinese student populations in America, about 4,000 students. At the University of Southern California, students from China gather regularly for social events. One of the students says he has not met many Americans because there are so many students from China. He says this meant adjusting to life in the United States was easier. One international economist told VOA that Chinese students added more than $100 million to the economy of Los Angeles last year. He adds that across the country, Chinese students spend more than $4.5 billion every year. Economists say China's economic growth is behind the big increase in Chinese young people studying in the United States. One economist said that Chinese business leaders are now richer and can afford to send their children to study in America. In the past, Chinese students received scholarships to study in America. Today, many students, or at least their parents, pay their own expenses. And that is not the only change. The Dean of Religious Life at USC says Chinese students traditionally majored in engineering or science. Now, they are beginning to choose fields like business, education, or film. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. The number of international students at colleges and universities in the United States has increased for the 5th year. The Institute of International Education in New York released its annual Open Doors report in November. The report says a record high of more than 720,000 students from other countries studied in America during the last academic year. The number was 5% higher than the year before, and almost 1/3 higher than 10 years ago. There were big increases from China, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, Iran, and Venezuela. Almost 22% of international students were Chinese, with increases especially at the undergraduate level. Together, almost half of all international students came from China, India, and South Korea. Peggy Blumenthal at the Institute says Chinese students are now studying throughout the United States. 10 years ago, she says, students from China knew about only a small number of universities in the United States. But now, they are being admitted to community colleges, liberal arts schools, and research universities across the country. Ms. Blumenthal suggests one reason for the increase is a lack of space in Chinese colleges for everyone who wants an education. She says students and their parents are also looking for a different educational experience. More international students study in California than any other state, followed by New York, Texas, Massachusetts, and Illinois. For the 10th year in a row, the University of Southern California in Los Angeles led the country, with more than 8,600 foreign students. The most popular area of study for international students is business and management, followed by engineering. Some schools are making special efforts to welcome students from other cultures. Workers greet students in different languages at a dining hall that the University of California, Los Angeles spent $5 million to modernize. Peter Angelis is an assistant vice chancellor at UCLA. He says 40% of the students are Asian, and opinion surveys showed that students wanted more Asian foods. The Open Doors report says about 45% of international students in the United States are women. Almost 2/3 of all foreign students receive the majority of their funding from personal and family sources. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. President Obama signed legislation in August to provide $26 billion to the states for education and health care. The measure includes $10 billion for education and $16 billion for Medicaid, the joint state-federal government medical program for the poor. The legislation will help 160,000 teachers and 150,000 police and public service workers keep their jobs. The House of Representatives approved the bill August 10th. House members had already begun a 6-week holiday when the Senate approved the measure. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, took the rare step of calling House lawmakers back to Washington to vote on the bill and send it to President Obama without delay. President Obama has stressed the importance of education for all Americans. He said this is necessary for the country to compete among some of the world's fastest-growing economies. Earlier in the week, the president spoke at the University of Texas. He talked about the decrease in college graduation rates in the United States. He said, "In a single generation, we've fallen from first place to 12th place in college graduation rates for young adults. That is unacceptable, but it is not irreversible. We can retake the lead." President Obama said educational success and economic well-being are linked. His goal is to increase the percentage of college graduates from 40% to 60% by the year 2020. The president said the federal government has already reformed the student loan system and increased tax credits for families struggling to pay college education costs. Some Republican lawmakers criticized the new measure. House Republican leader John Boehner dismissed the emergency jobs measure as more wasteful spending aimed at pleasing the Democrats' traditional union allies. Hours before the vote, President Obama told reporters at the White House that education and the safety of communities should not be political issues. He said, Those interests are widely shared throughout this country. A challenge that affects parents, children, and citizens in almost every community in America should not be a Democratic problem or a Republican problem. It is an American problem. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. An unusual high school in Texas recently welcomed a special visitor. President Obama visited Manor New Technology High School near the city of Austin. The high school seeks to help prepare students to meet the increasing demand for technology workers. It has gained national recognition for focusing on student projects in so-called STEM subjects: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Manor New Technology has 332 students. 68% are from ethnic or racial minorities. 52% are from poor families. Across the country, students from poor families are more likely to have low educational levels and leave school. But the Texas school sent 97% of its graduates to college in 2011 and all of its graduates in 2012. Most schools, however, do not have the financial support that Manor New Technology receives. It gets help from private organizations as well as state and federal funding. Technology schools are sometimes criticized for not paying enough attention to the arts and social sciences. But supporters say more money should go into STEM programs that will provide people with jobs. University of Texas professor Jeremy Surrey says workplace success depends on good communication and an ability to work well with others as a team. He says an understanding of cultures is important. For instance, some students at Manor New Technology High School reconstructed early Egyptian tools used to build pyramids. They learned about the engineering involved. But they also studied the social and cultural atmosphere of that time. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. On November 2nd, the United States held congressional and state elections in a year defined by voter dissatisfaction. Democrats tried to excite their party's base of support in an effort to limit Republican gains. That base includes young people. 2 years ago, 2/3 of voters under 30 voted for Barack Obama. The president urged them to remember that excitement and his campaign for change. His efforts to reach young voters included appearances on MTV and The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, along with college visits. The president spoke to about 35,000 people at Ohio State University. He said, "And now we are not just advocating change. We're not just calling for change.
We're doing the hard work of change. We're grinding it out. Sometimes it's frustrating. We're delivering change inch by inch, day by day. It's not easy. Believe me, I know it's not easy. Zach Howell, president of the College Republican National Committee, could have said the same thing 2 years ago. But he said this year was completely different. He said more young people are proudly identifying themselves as conservatives and as Republicans. He said, "It is all about the economy. That is everything to them. I mean, 20% of college graduates are unable to find work right now. So young people are concerned about their futures." 60% of college students approved of the job President Obama was doing in May of last year. That number was down to 44% in an Associated Press MTVU survey in October. Heather Smith is executive director of Rock the Vote. Her group tries to get young people to become politically active. She says schools need to provide more civics education, and states need to continue their efforts to make voting easier. More and more Americans vote early. Some states even let people register and vote on the same day. But Ms. Smith says the voter registration process may be one reason why young people are less likely to vote. But getting more people, especially young people, to vote is harder in years without a presidential election. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Join us online at voaspecialenglish.com and on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. President Obama sent Congress a proposal in March to rewrite the main federal education law. The current version of the law, signed by George W. Bush 8 years ago, is known as the No Child Left Behind Act. That name would go away. The current policy calls for every student to be able to pass state tests in reading and math by 2014. All schools must show yearly progress toward this goal. But states decide how much students need to know to show proficiency. President Obama's goal is that every student should graduate from high school ready for college and a career. The target date for schools is 2020. The President described the plan in one of his weekly radio and internet addresses. The President said, "What this plan recognizes is that while the federal government can play a leading role in encouraging the reforms and high standards we need, the impetus for that change will come from states and from local schools and school districts." Under the new proposal, states and school systems would compete for federal grants. The idea is similar to the administration's $4 billion race to the top competition to reform schools. Struggling schools could receive money for teacher improvement and for developing plans for success. The lowest performing schools would face changes, such as replacing teachers and the principal, or being closed. The administration sent its general ideas to Congress in what it called a blueprint for reform to develop the next education law. Ann Bryant is executive director of the National School Boards Association. Her group worked with the Department of Education on the plan. She says it is a good start, but still needs work. The plan would reward effective schools and teachers with money and other recognition. But leaders of the nation's largest teachers' unions criticized the administration's blueprint. Dennis Van Rokel of the National Education Association said it still relies on standardized tests to identify winners and losers. He also expressed disappointment that states would have to compete for money. Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers said the plan appears to place all the responsibility on teachers, but gives them 0% authority. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. For more programs, go to voaspecialenglish.com.